But in the middle of it, I was like convincing myself that God doesn't care about my needs. God plays tricks on me. If there's a God, like they told me growing up, and if God cares about my needs, and if this is an individual journey, then I'm going to tell God everything, and God can handle it because I'm sick of it, you know? Hi.
Hello everyone, I am Diego Albino Rodríguez Contreras, mucho gusto en conocerlos.
And I'm Erin, very nice to meet you. And this is called Love is the Remedy. Thank you for joining us. Sometimes on our podcast, we interview guests, and on this particular podcast, Diego is going to just be interviewing me about a little part of my life story.
I'm excited, Erin.
Thank you, Diego. I'm scared to death.
Why are you scared to death? You did that intro really fast. I don't know.
It's because I'm nervous.
You're nervous? What are we going to talk to everyone about today? Do you want me to ask?
Yeah.
So Erin, I've known you for a long time. When I first met you in acting class a long time ago, you didn't want to be my friend. It's a story for another time.
Didn't want to be.
Yeah, she didn't want to be my friend.
It's not that I didn't want to be your friend. I just didn't let you be my friend.
Erin doesn't think that guys and gals can be friends.
No.
Okay. But as I've
That's a different podcast.
That's a different podcast.
Sorry.
But we did talk about a lot of things as I got to know you, and actually where we bonded was not over the happy times, but over suicidal ideation. Now, that's the terminology that I use.
That's fine, yeah.
I know that being suicidal is another framework for that same experience. Now, how long did you experience these thoughts?
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Is there was a big portion of my life that I experienced suicidal ideation, and it was and I want to talk about it, and I talk about it not I'm able to talk about it because I don't live in that space anymore. I'm cured of it, and what an incredible journey. And I just want to shed light on it and maybe offer some kind of a hope if anybody is in those really difficult moments of feeling suicidal or having suicidal ideation. So what was your question?
Well, you answered it. It was did this happen?
Yes. So basically, the way I articulate it is that I was in a battle against my own mind. First of all, I was surviving against my own mind for 17 years. And the thoughts were as natural to me as breathing. So you think about when you wake up in the morning, you don't think about breathing. It's just there. But or it was as natural as, well, I need to go brush my teeth. I need to go and do this thing. And so it frightened me because I didn't know why it was happening for a very, very long time. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone because at the time of my life I was very much a people pleaser, and I didn't want to tell anybody about it because I didn't want to cause any problems to anybody. And so I just tried to figure it out on my own and cure it on my own. And nothing seemed to work for a very long time. And when I say, it's something that came over me. I basically, the sad part about it is that I got married when I was 24, went on my honeymoon, walked in the front door from my honeymoon, and the thought came over to me, I'm going to go upstairs and slit my wrists. And I didn't know where that thought came from, and it scared me and surprised me. And from that, and then being newly married, I felt this amazing amount of shame. I didn't have the word shame at the time. I didn't have the same words that I have now to be able to articulate the experience that I was having. But as I started to understand what I was feeling and experiencing, the word shame and guilt compounded because I was newly married, and I felt bad for my husband, like how sad for him that he has a wife like this. And I just became very good at, I still had to work, I still had to socialize, I still had to do all these things, but it took so much energy to do that because deep down or underneath, and the whole time I just felt like I was gritting my teeth and fighting against this these thoughts in my mind. So we would go out, we would have an evening with friends, I would walk in the front door, and the same thought, I'm going to go upstairs and slit my wrists. And something that a lot of times would stop me, it got to a point, it got so bad one time where I was actually going to take action. And I thought to myself, I was, again, such a people pleaser. I actually thought, well, you know, I've heard of the stories of people who actually go through this. And then at the funeral, the people around say, we wish that they would have reached out. We didn't know. So I thought, if I'm going to do this, I at least need to give someone a chance to help me. And even though that's the scariest thing to do, because again, I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I didn't want to, I felt so ugly inside, and yet on the external, there was this whole pressure to be attractive and to be, you know, just out of college, happily newly married. You're in the first 2 years of your marriage. It's supposed to be this honeymoon, this bliss, and that wasn't at all what I was experiencing. So I just felt horrible about myself, and really didn't have anyone to talk to about it, because in the community that I was in, the answers were always just go to Bible study, read your Bible, you'll be fine. And none of that worked. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to give someone a chance to help me. So I remember that my mom had gotten some counseling at some point, and she lived in another state at that time. So I decided I would call her, and I didn't tell her what I was actually thinking, but I told her I was really struggling and I thought that I needed some help. And so she put me in touch with this counselor that she had that had helped her with some things in her life, and this counselor lived in another state. But I just instinctively knew that this is the woman who was going to help me, because in our first conversation, she wasn't afraid of anything that I had to say. And I had been so afraid of my own self for so long, and I felt that other people would probably be afraid of me if they knew what I was really going through and experiencing. And so it was such a relief to actually just tell someone my thoughts and have her go, that's it? Like not minimize it, but just not be completely thrown off and surprised by it. So that was probably a step that I took that, at least at that point in the whole saga of it all, that kept me going, or alive, I guess. So I started counseling with her, like this was before we had internet. So she was in another state, and she agreed to do phone counseling with me. So I lived in Nebraska at the time, and I would hide in the freezing garage in the freezing winter, because I didn't want to embarrass my husband. I didn't tell him that I was doing this. I just wanted to get better so he could have a good wife, you know? And so I would just like go in the garage and like hide in the corner so he wouldn't find me, and I would just do like and counsel for like an hour, and that was my survival, my line of hope.
That's a lot.
Already, and we're only 5-10 minutes into the interview.
It's okay, yeah. Okay.
We just get right into it.
I love it. There are a couple things that are interesting to hear about that surprise me every time I hear the story. Why did having suicidal ideation make you ugly?
It's dark in there. I mean, you hear voices, you hear death is not beautiful. I mean, it's definitely, when you're fighting against something that is so unnatural. We aren't, you know, I mean, death is a part of our life now, but original design wasn't for death. And so you're fighting against that, and that's just a lot. You're in a constant battle. So when you're in a constant battle inside of your mind, it's not pretty.
And why was being pretty so important to you at that time?
It's important to a lot of people, but I think I grew up in a culture where we, we were all, I have a big family, and there was somewhat of a expectation of perfection, a success, beauty, talent, and things like that, and failing didn't seem like, it's not even failing, but just having problems didn't seem like it was allowed. And certainly at the time, there was no one having discussions like we have now about mental health. There was nowhere to go that wasn't like wouldn't have been whispered about. What's wrong with her? Why is she so strange? As opposed to, how can we help her feel better? That was what I really needed. But the contrast in the community that I was in, there wasn't a place to go for that. And there were times that I kind of would reach out like to in certain ways, because it's like, again, I didn't have the words or the strength that I have now, but back then I was just so afraid of everyone and so fragile inside that just even being anything could have been taken the wrong way. So if I went and tried to maybe suggest something a little to like a pastor, and if they didn't handle it because the pastors aren't skilled in mental health counseling and skilled in that kind of thing. It's just all like, go to the Bible, read the Bible, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. Well, none of that was working. And so if I even tried to like do a little bit of suggestion that maybe I might need a little, I'm confused, or I'm a mess, I cry all the time, I don't know what's wrong with me, then it would have made it worse to take those risks with someone. So I just like kept it all inside. And when you do that, it becomes a big mess of confusion and dysfunction, and it just gets really ugly.
So it sounds like you were in an environment, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were in an environment where, and I'm asking because I really don't know.
Oh.
Everything was the same? Like,
What do you mean?
You're going, hey, I'm imperfect, I have these problems. People find out I've got problems, they're going to think less of me.
Yeah.
Does that mean that your cohort, your friends and family, that they were perfect?
Nobody was talking about anything. Nobody was talking about anything they're struggling with. If a bunch of our friends got married at the same time, we all were just like, what have we done? Now, like 25 years later, when there's been divorces and affairs and all this stuff, and you finally talk about stuff. Well, at the time, we all were just pretending like we were all like, hey, 24 and happily married, and nobody knew how to have the conversations. The adults weren't teaching us how to have the conversations about any of this transition in life and things like that. And so it was just a facade. Like, let's say at church or in youth groups or in Bible studies and stuff like that, there was the talk about grace, but there was an expectation of perfection. And then perfection looked like everything's happy all the time. You become financially stable immediately when you get married, and then you have kids, and then it's just like this progression of things that are supposed to happen in life. And when I walked in my front door after I got married, I was trying to do the right thing. It's what you do. You get married, and then I didn't try to have these thoughts. I wasn't trying to. They just came over me, and so I didn't know who to talk to about it, because no one was having these kinds of conversations. Literally, it would be the response would be, well, you're fine, or what's wrong with you? Read the Bible, or that's interesting. Like, nothing, no one could get in there with you and like unpack what is going on inside of me. Your
therapist seemed to help.
She helped start the process for me. It took a lot longer to heal from it, but she was thank God for her. Yeah.
I guess two questions that come to mind. Number one, your husband. So
yeah.
I, again, didn't grow up in the same background that you did. Mm-hmm. This is in Nebraska, this is happening. Mm-hmm. Nothing against Nebraska. We love Nebraska.
Love Nebraska.
Love Nebraska, but it was happening in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that if my wife were experiencing what you were going through, that I'd want to help. I mean, the thing is, we can't do that help for our significant other. Mm-hmm. That work has to be done by our significant other, though we can be a liaison. And, not to paint your former husband in a negative light, was he able to do that, or just help me understand this dynamic?
Yeah, so I believe that he was also a product of the environment that we grew up in, and so he wasn't able to have conversations that I may have wanted him to have, because no one was talking about any of this. And so he definitely had a wife that seemed unstable. I would melt down very easily. I was very easily hurt by anything. And I think because he was so naive, and he was, again, in all fairness to him, a product of his environment, didn't really know what to do. And so when I would try to I would find a book that I would say, this is helping me understand myself, and I would want to share, because of what you say, like you want to journey with whatever your spouse is going through naturally. He wouldn't be able to go there, because it was probably too painful for him to he's very sensitive person as well, and he probably didn't know where to go with any of it either. Even though I would like try to invite him into certain conversations, he would at some point, I think it was just too much for him, and he just preferred to spend his time on other things. But I do look back and I think, there were certain things that I think he did to the best of his ability. And at some point, I think that when you are someone who is that far gone in your own mind, like nothing anybody can really do, that he couldn't have been the one to fix it. And I can't, I used to be angry at him because I wanted him to make it all better. And it's just not fair to expect someone else to be that person to do that. But yes, if you are in a relationship with someone and you are committed, ideally you can walk through it together, but I just don't think he had the resources at all. Maybe now, older in his life, he may, but at the time he was young and very naive as well.
Unfortunately, you chose a different path, so you're here with us,
Yeah.
which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah.
You've been a tremendous value in my life. You've been a terrific friend and support group, and I appreciate you've been very kind, and we've bonded over our shared faith, which is great. How did your faith parlay into your getting out of that space or shifting things around?
Okay. So my full-time job, it seems like I was working full-time, and trying to make a good marriage, and then trying to also figure out what's going on with me for a very long time. And then eventually the marriage was just a mess because of so many reasons for so long. And not just this, there was just other things. And so at some point, gosh, I don't know how long we had been married. At some point, we decided to have a child, which is just like, whatever.
Was it like Friday night? You're like, what's going on? We could do some Domino's pizza, Blockbuster.
Way more complex story that I won't get into that.
Yeah.
But it was more like time to have a baby. Like my clock is ticking. I really always wanted to be a mother. I wanted lots of kids. And to me, it doesn't matter. Even though I knew the relationship was not ideal, it just became very apparent that I really wanted to have a child. And again, we weren't really in groups with other married people processing marriage. I would have loved to have been, but that just wasn't his preference. And so it was like kind of not really well thought out. I would have liked to have been thought out, but we had this beautiful child. So to answer your question about the faith thing, I that time I had become so angry and bitter and all of the pissed off and defiant and against church people, because no one helped me. Like there were so many times I even after we left, we moved out of Nebraska, we moved away to another place, and even though I had the therapist, she only could help me for so long, then she moved away, and there was this whole thing with that. And so I think that my hope was in people to help me. And my expectation, I had really high expectations in people, like in my parents or in older people at church or in pastors. Like they put themselves in these positions, they need to be the ones to help me. Like there is a natural order, I believe, like of mentorship, of parenting, and I didn't feel like I got that. It wasn't done well in my life, and I let that make me become incredibly angry. And then there was just some really bad mishandling, like when I would reach out to certain people for help, and I just decided I don't want to trust anybody, and I hate everybody, and hate this world. I just felt like I was like the abused puppy, like shaking in the corner, that they find and rescue and they take to the shelter and they try to like give it a little food. Like that's the image I had of myself, or just like this terrified little puppy in the corner, like biting any hand that would try to be nice to me. But instead of people having compassion on me and helping me, which is what I really needed, I felt like people were saying, she's a horrible, like she's a mess, like, and then just would walk away, and not really help me in the ways that I would have really benefited from at the time. So I had my son, and And it was beautiful. I had a home birth with him, and I loved that experience. And there was this one moment, I don't know, he must have been about 6 months old, and I was breastfeeding him, and it was beautiful. The moonlight was coming in, and I was just holding him, and I just had this overwhelming, I'm going to start crying, but I had this overwhelming impulse, or just this experience of pure intimacy with another human being. And I just, it shocked me, because I didn't have that experience in any other area of my life. And what I thought at the time was, must be what it's like. This is what intimacy must be like, where there's no pain between you and another human being. And this is what love must be like, when there's like no pain between you. Like, there had been no pain between my child and me yet. It was just this most beautiful experience of love, and a bond that I didn't have, and it contrasted with everything else in my life. And I thought, I have to get better, because now I have this child that I love so much, and I have to tell him what's true, and I don't know what's true. And I was still suicidal, by the way. Even after I had him, I was still waking up to this like new experience of love and intimacy, but I still was dark in other areas. And so I had this beautiful child that I thought, I have to find what's true, because one day he's going to ask me what's true, and I want to be able to tell him in ways that nobody else was able to tell me. And also, I need to be healthy in every other area of my life, because I want the whole rest of my life to feel like how I feel right now in this moment with him. And so that just started me on the path. It was only like, I'm searching for truth. I wasn't believing in God at the time, even though I had grown up with a very tender heart, very tender spiritual heart, and always prayed. And my very first memory is like 3 years old, sitting by my window, looking out, asking Jesus to come into my heart. So there was a very strong beginning of faith in my life. And I just think that as I look back, there was just a battle for my soul. And that's what I believe this suicidal ideation was for all those years for me. But yeah, so that started the path of me seeking for what's true when he was born.
That's amazing. There's so many questions I have. What has kept coming up as I'm listening is hearing your relationship to the facade or the exterior modality of perfection. I just keep feeling like you were in this perfect idyllic play of what it is to be a perfect American human being. And
Christian human being.
Yeah.
It wasn't American, it was Christian.
Which to me is like American, because that's like old school, but I agree with you.
Okay.
Let's call that for, I'm happy to qualify it
Yeah.
that way. So perfect Christian, middle America type of thing. And so perhaps in your community, everyone wants you to like hold formation, like, you're perfect on the outside, you should be good. And if, Erin isn't perfect, who's beautiful and got it together, then what does that say about our community? So she has to, it almost feels like they're asking you to hold the formation, because if you have a break in the facade, therefore the entire thing is ruined.
Maybe.
So it just feels like there was a lot of anxiety for me. And you also talk about you were supposed to do this. You were supposed to. So it seems like there was this like implicit.
There was just no guidance otherwise.
There's like a script.
Yeah.
It almost
right.
sounds like there was a script, right? That you were.
This is what you do.
This is what you do. Yeah. What do you call that? It seems like that was. This is what you do was navigating your life, and you can fulfill. This is what you do.
No. What do you mean? What do you call it? Like,
I don't know. It just seems like there's a script that you had to follow, and you couldn't fulfill it.
I was trying to, yeah.
And your inability to fulfill.
And I
this
made a
script.
lot of bad choices.
Yeah.
In doing so, because they weren't from my own heart.
Yeah, and the script was forcing you to feel depressed because you weren't fulfilling it. And the script is unrealistic, right?
Well, and it stemmed from, the choices that I started to make that in retrospect led me down this really dark path, where there was this one point when I was in college. I'm an avid journal keeper, and I remember writing in my journal, I'd done something that was just against the script, and it was like I was going to hell, and.
So one mess up.
You're going to hell. I'm going to hell.
Even though.
And it's more of God doesn't want anything to do with me. And I still have that journal where I wrote, I guess God won't want anything to do with me.
So you messed up.
And now I have to do life on my own. And I based a ton of decisions from there on out on that one lie that God doesn't want anything to do with me and that I have to do life on my own. So that just started this trajectory. In retrospect,
I have to do life on
understand.
my own.
Yeah. In isolation without. So that was like sort of deep down and fundamental, but I was also at the same time simultaneously like longing for connection and longing for acceptance and longing to feel like I don't have to be perfect and I don't have to be, and I can be normal and I can make mistakes. But the two hadn't figured themselves out yet. They hadn't integrated at that time when I was in my 20s.
Yeah, that's a lot. So it was heavy, and it sounds like your child was the beginning of that
Catalyst.
transition.
In many cases it is. The
And
first
it
child
is.
for a woman, it's just like...
Yeah, no, I know from my mom
Yeah.
it was. And then it ultimately led to this quest
Yes,
of truth.
absolutely.
And it sounds like the quest for truth landed you back at God.
It did.
How did that happen?
When I was, I don't know, when my son was maybe 2.5 or 3.5 years old, the economy crashed. My marriage was bad. I wanted out. I think he wanted out, but wasn't brave enough to articulate that and like take the action. And
You mean your husband?
Yes, at the time. And the economy crashed, and all I ever wanted, we moved 20 times by the time I was 20 years old. All I ever wanted was my own home. And we had bought a home in Arizona where we lived, and the economy crashed and we lost our home. So to me, that was...
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, we had to short sale it.
But still, I
Yeah,
wasn't aware.
it was like my home. I would still be happy in that home today, but we had to let it go because jobs, and I had a small child, and it was a lot, and I won't get into all those details. But so that was another loss for me. Just the thing that I wanted to be stable, like I could never figure out how to stabilize because of all the moving we had and growing up, and then our family life was incredibly chaotic and things. So all I ever wanted was that home, and I wanted family, and it was all just falling apart. And we ended up relocating to Colorado. And I forgot your question. What am I answering?
You are answering the question, which is how you got to God.
Yeah. So I'm fiercely throwing myself into situations. I decided to get divorced. I decided to take all the hits. I'll be the ugly one to I mean, we'd been married for maybe 9 or 10, 13 years by then. I can't remember.
13
I
years?
worked hard at it.
That's funny that you're like
Yeah.
blurring 9 and 13. That's like a huge amount
Yeah,
of time.
no, I worked very hard. I really wanted to figure it out. I really wanted it. I made a vow. Even so, I had made a vow, and I wanted to honor it. And it's not any girl's dream come true to wake up and be like, yeah, I always wanted to get divorced. Like, it's not the dream come true, regardless of the culture that I grew up in. And so, but it had to be done because I was trying to survive against still suicidal ideation, and I had tried everything. So I was like, I've got to be done, and I've got to just figure myself out and not have the pressure of marriage and not have, all the heartache that we were going through. So ended up in Colorado, living in I called it a crappy 1-bedroom apartment after I lost a home and I have a small child, and there was no money to move the furniture from Phoenix to Colorado, so there was nothing to sleep on. And so then on top of all of the other stuff, I was just pissed off because I thought, that's it. God does not care about any of my needs. Although obviously I have shelter, I have family, right? But in the middle of it, I was like convincing myself that God doesn't care about any of my needs. God plays tricks on me. If there's a God, like they told me growing up, and if God cares about my needs, and if this is an individual journey, then I'm going to tell God everything, and God can handle it because I'm sick of it, And so I decided that I was going to give one last effort to prove that God doesn't exist, or that if God exists, God doesn't care about me. Because again, these things that I had longed for just gone. And then it was a little bit of you call pretty girl syndrome, which is like, why is this happening to me? Which fair enough, but it was still a lot to be going through, regardless. And
I don't. I think suffering is suffering.
Yeah.
And it's all relative. So.
Sure.
You had done the thing, and.
I think fighting against your own mind for many, many years is quite deep.
It's profound, and a lot of people have taken their own lives. So
Yeah.
it's incredible that you didn't.
Yeah, it is actually, because.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, did I really go through that? And the answer is yeah. Like I have journals full of it,
I'm grateful you're here.
Thank you.
I really am.
But anyway, so that was it. I was gonna write, I got this journal. It was my piss off God journal. I'm gonna write my need down, and then I'm gonna read a Bible verse. I'm gonna write the Bible verse down, and I put it down. I'm gonna go, and that's gonna, like, somehow I was gonna prove that God didn't care about me. And so my journal entry was, I need a fucking bed, God, because
You talked to God that way?
I did, because
Wow.
I didn't care. I was like, God can handle it, or God better handle it.
Wow.
I was that defiant and angry. And so then there was this little creek that I used to take my son in the afternoons, and I would just sit by the water because I love water and I love watching it. And I would just sit there and just be and just try to be and just have a moment in the day with my son, who I love so much, who brought me so much joy. So we were on our way out the apartment, and after I wrote that journal entry, I put it down, walked out, and someone was moving out that day, and there was like a really beautiful couch sitting by the dumpster, and I was just like, then I was like, fuck you, God. I was like so mad, because it was literally an answer to prayer. Like, God provided something for us to sleep on. And so that couch became like our bed, my son and I, for I don't remember how much longer, but we slept on it. And that's like one of those markers in my faith where I was like, okay, God actually does care about my need. No, I'm not living in a gorgeous house. No, this is not a beautiful queen size bed. No, my son doesn't have his own amazing room. But I can't deny that I said I need something to sleep on. And then I walked outside and there was something for me to sleep on. So whenever I have a moment of, it's not like everything got amazing after that, but that's like a huge marker in my life where I realize, okay, now my faith is real and it's personal. And God showed me I'm real, I'm here, and I love you and I care about you. And so that's like a marker that I always go back. I'll never go back to before that. And if life ever gets hard or things aren't happening the way I hoped, I can always say, well, but God is real, and that's okay. So that was like a huge marker for me.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. But I still was suicidal.
You still was suicidal? Okay.
I couldn't shake it.
Okay.
It was in 2015 that I became cured 100% from suicidal ideation. July 4th weekend of 2015, Freedom Weekend, the chains of that mental turmoil were released. And I believe it was a turmoil of my soul. And looking back now, I believe that it was, it was spiritual warfare. There's a lot of research in mental health and blah, 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 but I believe in my own personal experience, it was spiritual warfare of me continuing to attach lies and to hold on to lies that I believed were true, that kept my mind in those chains. And it was in 2015 that I was set free from those. And I never did, I never did medication or anything like that. I just kept gritting it out and figuring it out.
And for some people, they need the medication.
Absolutely.
And so it's
maybe I could have used some medication at different times.
I don't know.
I'm not against it.
Yeah, I think
I'm just saying in my own story,
that's your journey.
I chose not to because I wanted to figure it out myself.
And that worked for you.
Yeah.
And I think that this is such a sensitive topic because it can
Yes.
go so many different ways.
So many, yeah.
I think
we have to
that,
be careful.
Well, the key is I think that people are there to help you,
Mm-hmm.
and finding the help and doing the work yourself is part of it.
Okay, so quick question.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole story about how I
think that's another episode for another time.
Yeah.
For now, what has love helped you to see? Because it's so powerful. God's unconditional love is so powerful. What has love helped break in your life?
So for me, the cure, I just will say, with the cure in that time in my life of suicidal ideation, I was so isolated. Depression isolates you. It makes you think weird things. It makes you not want to connect with people. And what God did in my life is he helped me fall in love. And I fell in love with someone, and that connection cured me. of this suicidal ideation, and from that connection, I started to be able to start to trust people, and it was and I then reconnected to God, and rebonded with God in a different way through this relationship that I had. And so the thing that love has broken that isn't true is that we should live in isolation, and that there's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Nothing that we do, nothing that we experience, and that the lie isn't that God doesn't want us. The lie is that God doesn't want us. To me, I was attaching to something that was just completely false and not true. What's true is that God actually loves me and wants me.
Cool. Great. I love it. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Okay,
You're
this is
welcome.
Another wonderful episode. We're gonna keep the story going another time, but for now, we're gonna wrap up here. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for sharing such a vulnerable story, Erin, as well.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. This is Love the Remedy with Diego Rodriguez.
And Erin.
Thank you so much.